My name is Lily. I live in a small town not far from Bristol in the United Kingdom. I am 35 years old. For a long time, I believed I had a simple and good life. I was married to Peter. He is much older than me. We have one daughter, Ava. She is 10 years old. She goes to a small local school near our home. Our house is not big, but it is quiet. We have lived there for almost 10 years. Peter works at a furniture company in town. Before Ava was born, I worked at a supermarket. When she came into our lives, I stayed home. Later, I started doing small online jobs to help with money. It was not much, but I tried. Peter paid most of the bills. I took care of the house. I cooked. I helped Ava with school. We were not perfect, but I thought we were okay. For many years, I believed that. Then, slowly, things began to change. At first, it was small. Peter came home later than usual. He said work was busy. I believed him. I told him to take care of himself. He nodded, but his eyes were somewhere else. He stopped smiling at me the way he used to. At dinner, he barely spoke. He looked tired, but not in the normal way. Something felt different, even though I could not explain it. He started using his phone more. He kept it in his pocket, even at home. Before, he left it on the table. Now, he held it close. Sometimes he smiled quietly while reading messages. When I asked what it was, he said, "Nothing important." When I walked into the room, he often turned the screen away. One evening, I asked him gently, "Peter, is everything okay? You don't seem like yourself." He didn't look at me. "It's just work," he said. "I have a lot on my mind." Then he stood up and left the room. Another night, he said he was going out to meet someone from work. I asked who it was. He said, "Someone you don't know." He left early in the evening and came back very late. When I asked where he had been, he said, "Please don't ask questions like that." That night, I sat alone on the sofa. The house felt cold. The next day, while Ava was at school and Peter was at work, I did something I never thought I would do. I opened his laptop. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to check someone else's private life, but my heart would not let me stay quiet anymore. I needed answers. My hands were shaking. I saw messages, many messages. One name appeared again and again, Megan. The words on the screen felt heavy. They spoke about feelings, about being happy, about wanting to spend time together. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence. My heart felt like it was breaking, slowly, piece by piece. That night, when Peter came home, I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I said quietly, "I saw the messages. I know about Megan." He looked at me. His face was calm. "You had no right to read those." I asked one question. "Do you have feelings for her?" He looked away. "Yes." That one word changed everything. He didn't say sorry. He didn't explain. He sat down and looked at his phone. I went to the kitchen and cried quietly so Ava wouldn't hear me. The next morning, Peter left early. He didn't say goodbye. I made breakfast for Ava. I helped her get ready for school. She looked at me and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled and said, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. After I dropped her at school, I checked our bank account. I saw things I didn't recognize, places we never went together, money spent without talking to me. I understood then. That day, I called my sister Emma. I told her everything. She said, "Lily, you can stay with me, you and Ava." But I wasn't ready. Ava's school was here, this was her home, and I was scared. I didn't know how to start again. Peter started coming home later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. He stopped eating with us. He stopped talking to Ava. She noticed. "Why doesn't Dad eat with us anymore?" she asked one night. I didn't know what to say. One evening, Peter came home angry. I asked where he had been. He said I was making problems. Then he walked past me and closed the bedroom door. I sat on the stairs and cried quietly. I felt invisible in my own house. A few days later, I sat down with Ava. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to hurt her. I said, "Dad is going through something difficult. He might not be home as much." She looked at me and asked, "Is it my fault?" I held her close. "No, sweetheart, never. This is not your fault." 1 week later, Peter told me he was leaving. He said, "I need time alone." I looked at him and said, "You already left us in your heart." He packed a bag and walked out. He didn't say goodbye to Ava. That night, Ava sat by the window. She didn't cry, she just waited. I sat beside her and said, "We still have each other, you and me. We will be okay." She leaned against me and closed her eyes. That was the moment I knew my life was changing. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? Sometimes just knowing someone is there makes a heavy story easier to tell. After Peter left, the house felt strange. Not empty, just quiet in a different way. There were no footsteps in the evening, no sound of keys at the door, no low voice from the other room. At first, the silence felt heavy. I kept waiting for a sound that never came. Ava noticed everything. She ate slowly, she talked less. At night, she asked if I would stay with her until she fell asleep. I did, every night. One evening, she asked softly, "Mom, is Dad coming back?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but no matter what happens, I am here. I will always be here." She nodded and held my hand tighter. The first weeks were hard. I cried when Ava was asleep. I cried in the shower so she wouldn't hear me. I cried because I felt tired, because I felt scared, because I felt like I had failed at something I worked so hard to keep together. But every morning I got up. I made breakfast, I packed Ava's bag, I walked her to school. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. Peter came back one weekend to take his things. Ava stayed with my mother that day. I didn't want her to see boxes being carried out of her home. Peter moved quietly. He didn't look around much. He didn't look at me either. When he finished, he stood near the door and said, "I hope you'll be okay." I looked at him calmly. "I will," I said. "You don't need to worry about me anymore." He nodded and left. When the door closed, I felt something I didn't expect. Peace. The house felt lighter. There were no secrets anymore. No waiting, no cold looks, just me, Ava, and the truth. Money became a real worry. Peter sent some support, but it wasn't enough. I looked at our bills again and again. I counted everything. I stopped buying anything extra. I wore old clothes. I cooked simple meals. I started looking for work. Every morning after dropping Ava off at school, I searched online. I sent messages. I filled out forms. Some places never replied. Some said no. Then one day, a small bookshop in town called me. They needed part-time help. The pay was small, but it was honest work. I said yes. My mother agreed to pick Ava up from school and stay with her until I came home. I was grateful. Without her, I don't know how I would have managed. The first day at work, my hands were shaking. It had been years since I worked outside the house. I felt nervous standing behind the counter. I felt slow. I felt unsure. But when the first customer smiled and thanked me, something inside me woke up. I felt useful again. Each day after work, I walked home instead of taking the bus. I needed the air. I needed time to think. Sometimes I cried while walking, sometimes I just breathed. But with every step, I felt a little stronger. Ava started to change too. She smiled more, she talked less. At night, she asked if I would stay with her until she fell asleep. I did, every night. One evening, she asked softly, "Mom, is Dad coming back?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but no matter what happens, I am here. I will always be here." She nodded and held my hand tighter. There were still hard days. Some mornings I woke up tired before the day even started. Sometimes memories came back. Sometimes I wondered how I missed the signs for so long. But I stopped asking myself why. I started asking, what now? One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was orange and soft. The air was calm. Ava was inside, reading quietly. I thought about everything I had lived through, the love, the silence, the disappointment, and then I realized something important. I wasn't broken. I was learning. I didn't need someone who stayed when life was easy. I didn't need someone who made me feel small in my own home. I needed peace. I needed honesty. I needed myself. Weeks turned into months. Life became simpler but more real. I worked, I came home, I cooked dinner with Ava, we talked about our day, we laughed more. One day, Ava asked, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I looked at her and said, "Yes, we already are." I didn't know what Peter was doing anymore. I stopped checking, I stopped wondering. His life was no longer my responsibility. Mine was, and Ava's. I learned that strength doesn't come from staying quiet. It comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. Some nights when the house was quiet, I sat alone and felt grateful. Grateful that I listened to my heart, grateful that I stood up, grateful that I didn't stay where love was gone. Life is not perfect now. I still worry sometimes, I still get tired, but I feel free. Free to build a life that feels honest. Free to raise my daughter with love and safety. Free to be myself again. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I survived something that once felt impossible, and I didn't lose myself. I found her.